Welcome! In this video, we'll show you how to use the Esri Field Maps app for FrogBATT, which is the European FrogBit before and after treatment tracker. FrogBATT is a standardized data collection protocol that helps us understand the impacts of FrogBit control actions and then develop best management practices. This app is created and maintained by the European FrogBit Collaborative. For more information about the collaborative, visit efbcollaborative.net. First, let's talk about how FrogBATT works. The first step is to enroll a management zone, or an area where you'll be managing or treating FrogBit in the app. You'll be doing this by drawing a polygon around where you want to manage. This is a site that you're going to return to again and again, and so there's no need to create another one after the first year. You can enroll a zone at any time of year, but it's best to do it when EFB is growing so you can accurately map its extent. Ideally, you should create management zones for all the areas where you're going to be managing FrogBit, but you can also collect data from untreated or control areas when possible. Thus, you can either designate each zone as either a treatment site or an untreated control site. I'll talk more about how to choose your management zones later. Next, you should monitor your site before management and collect monitoring data in the FrogBATT app. Monitoring involves assessing the status of FrogBit across your entire management zone and then collecting FrogBit and other plant data from random points using a 1 meter squared quadrat. You can choose the level of complexity for submitting plant community data. There's no requirement for plant identification. You just have to be able to ID FrogBit and then note the characteristics of plants surrounding it. Like, are they submerged plants? Are they emergent? Things like that. Very simple. This monitoring should be done within 2 weeks before the planned management date to allow for flexibility in weather and scheduling. Remember to monitor any untreated control zones around the same time. Next, you will conduct your chosen management actions within the water body. The ideal time for treatment is before the plant develops seeds and turions to reduce future FrogBit growth. In the app, you will submit a new management record for each type of action performed between pre- and post-treatment monitoring. If the same action is repeated, like say you use herbicide twice, you will just note the number of times that you did it and the dates. If you use the miss and treatment tracker to record your management data, there's no need to enter this data again in FrogBATT. You can simply link to your miss and data, which I will show you in the app. Finally, you will monitor your site after any form of treatment or management. We would like you to schedule your post-treatment monitoring to allow time for the treatment to take effect. Mechanical techniques usually show immediate results, while physical and chemical treatments may vary. Through these 4 steps, you will have collected enough data for us to analyze how well your treatments performed at reducing FrogBit density, and we'll be able to compare your data to other managers' data across the Great Lakes Basin. Before we get started in the app, here's how to access the app and other associated resources. You can find all FrogBATT resources on the EFB Collaborative's ArcGIS Hub site, which is at hub.efbcollaborative.net. You will need an ArcGIS account with collector level capabilities to access the app and this site. If you don't have access to an ArcGIS account, the EFB Collaborative offers access upon request by granting an ArcGIS community account to eligible organizations. You can request an account on the EFB Hub site here. So there's a little section that says, I need access to an ArcGIS account, and then you can fill out this form at this button here. If you already have an ArcGIS account, you'd follow the instructions here, and you can request to join the EFB Esri group to get access to the app. Once you have access, you will be able to sign into the hub site and gain access to the app. So then these tabs will appear up at the top, and we are interested in FrogBATT. So on the FrogBATT page, you can read the standard operating procedures or the SOP. You can submit a feedback survey. A link to this and any other training videos will also be made available here. We highly recommend reading the SOP before heading out into the field, as it contains all things FrogBATT in more detail than in this video. And if you need to reference the SOP in the field, there's a link to it within the app itself. All the data that is collected is going into this FrogBATT for field maps map in the ArcGIS Field Maps app, which is available for both Apple and Android devices. I'll show you how to use the actual app in a bit. To use FrogBat, you will also need some tools out in the field, namely a cell phone or a tablet with the ArcGIS Field Maps app installed and access to the FrogBat for Field Maps app. You will also need a 1 meter squared quadrat and a way to measure water depth. For instructions on how to build a quadrat, check out the SOP on the hub site. Alright, so here we are in ArcGIS Field Maps. I'm using an Android phone, so this app might look a little bit different if you're using an iPhone. But the first step is to sign in with ArcGIS Online. I will sign in with my account. And then it will show all of your different groups that you have, and then you will choose the European FrogBit Collaborative. So a bunch of different maps will show up, but the one that we are interested in for this training is the FrogBat for Field Maps. So we'll open that up. It might take a second to load. An important thing to do is to check out the GPS accuracy that is up at the top of the screen. You want that to kind of get as low as possible while you are out in the field. But right now I'm using Wi-Fi. I'm in a building, so mine is not great. It's going to give me a little warning that 30 feet is required, but too bad. All right, so one of the first things that we want to do is make a offline area, and this is not necessary, not actually necessary, but you can do this if you are going to be in an area with really bad cell phone service or no cell phone service whatsoever. So to do that, we'll go back, go to the 3 dots next to the app and add an offline area. So it's going to load the map. You can select the area that you would like to download. So I'm going to go down to where I am, and I'm going to select this area. You kind of zoom in and out to get the area that you would like. If you want to change the level of detail, so basically how zoomed in or zoomed out you are, you can select this room option, which, so it says more detail lets you see more on the map when you zoom in, less detail means a smaller download size. So I don't know, I'll just pick at the building level, sure, why not? So that gives us a much bigger area to download. And then you just say download area, and you can see we've got a status bar of how long that is going to take us to download. It is going, and once it is done, we will have that entire map saved for when we want to go out in the field. So I would recommend doing this before you leave your office, when you've got some strong signal or strong Wi-Fi, and then when you're out in the field, you will have all of the map data that you need to work with. So you can download different areas for, these different maps for the different areas that you're going to be visiting. So you don't just have to have one, you can have a whole bunch if you want, depending on how much you want to store on your phone. Before we enroll a zone in the app, I want to go over a few things you should consider. All FrogBat data collection revolves around the establishment of a management zone polygon in the app. Establishing the management zone must happen before any other data collection can occur. The management zone polygon will serve as the repository for your associated records, including your monitoring and management data. There are a few things to consider when deciding how big to make your management zone polygon or where to place it. The management zone must not overlap another management zone polygon. This will lead to data calculation errors within the app. You will need to pick an area that is representative of the FrogBit growing within your water body. The minimum size of the zone should be at least 10 by 10 meters to account for both the average accuracy of a GIS-enabled device and for the minimum number of quadrats that will need to fit within the polygon for monitoring. There is no maximum size for a management zone, but we recommend enrolling a management zone that is less than 1/2 acre in size. After that point, the number of monitoring quadrats required increases and traversing the management zone might become burdensome. If you are managing a larger area, consider enrolling only part of it in the management zone. Next, you'll want to consider the habitat. Because EFB is a floating leaf plant, it has the capability to move across the water with wind and wave action. Frogbat is probably best to use in areas where this type of movement is restricted, like in a retention pond, a stagnant wetland, a cove along a lake, etc., rather than in wide open water environments like in the middle of a 2-acre lake. Regardless of habitat type, expand the boundary of the management zone around not only where you think you will be actually managing EFB, but to where you think it might move within its immediate vicinity with that wave and wind action. Create a management zone you would feel comfortable returning to year after year if necessary. So you really want to consider access to that zone, staff turnover, property lines, your management goals, and other things. You also want to consider who is going to manage the data for your management zone on your team. The person who creates the zone will be the one responsible for adding to its management and monitoring data. It is difficult to change the user associated with a management unit after it's been created, so consider this very carefully. Feel free to enroll as many management zones as you wish, but budget time accordingly to provide management and monitoring data for all the zones you have enrolled. It is better to enroll a few more representative units that you can reliably provide data for than a whole bunch that you might not have time to return to. All right, so let's see how to enroll a management unit. What we'll do is we will press on the big plus sign down on the bottom, and we want to enroll a site. So this will give us some little crosshairs, and we can do this one of two ways. So we can either kind of just draw out the site based on the aerial imagery, or we can stream our location to kind of follow us along as we walk around the boundary of our site. If you're interested in streaming your location, or basically drawing your management zone's boundary as you walk, I'll show you how to do that in the next video. In my case, I am going to draw my management unit manually. So what I will do is I will go down to this wetland here, and I will add a point. You kind of just move the screen around to move your cursor, and keep adding new points or vertices to get around the boundary here. So I'm going to include this entire wetland. And if I've got a point up here that I do not want, so I'm going to remove that point, which I can select the 3 dots. I can say delete selected point. Now that is looking pretty good. It's encompassing my entire wetland that I want to have. So that's looking good. So the next thing you can do, if you would like, is to take a photo of the site. That is not necessary, but you can. By doing that, you would just take a photo. It's a great photo of my keyboard. You could also add an attachment of a photo that you already have in your camera roll. All right, so as it says here, fill out this form when creating a new site for FrogBat monitoring. If you're unsure how to fill out this form, check out the standard operating procedures. That has a link to the SOP if you ever need that out in the field. It'll automatically capture your enrollment date. And then we will get into our identifying information for the site. So the first thing to do is to provide a name for the site. It's got to be unique enough that nobody else has named it that same thing. It will tell you if someone else has already named a site your name. So try to pick something unique. Test site for video is what I will call this. put in your full name here, your organization name. If you don't see your organization here, no worries, you can put other and add in a new organization name. That'll pop up below. However, I'm just going to say I am from the Great Lakes Commission. And then it'll do some things automatically for you. So it'll calculate the site area in acres. This is a huge site. I wouldn't actually recommend making your site this big. As I mentioned before, your site should only be less than half an acre or so. But for the purposes of the example, we'll just make it pretty big. The type of water body, you can select that. I will say this is a wetland. And then it will ask you about the type of wetland. This is an emergent marsh. Let's see, is the water at the site flowing? No. Is this area within 500 meters of a public boat launch or access site? No. Is this current EFB invasion stage? What is the current EFB invasion stage at this site? So I will say it has been previously detected here. And then I'm going to say whether I want this to be a treatment site or an untreated control site. So a treatment site is obviously a site that you are treating in some way or managing frogbit. And then an untreated control site means that you are not managing frogbit there, but you would like to use it as a control. So you will monitor this site, but you will not treat it. You can also put that it's a to be determined. And it will have to decide that later. But I am going to say this is a treatment site because that is the most likely option that you will have. And then, has EFB at the site been previously treated? No. And then you can put any notes about the site. Lots of EFB. But you can make any notes about the habitat or anything that you like. All right, so we filled out the form. That's really all you need to do for enrolling a site. Then we go all the way back up to the top. Up in the very upper right corner, there is a checkbox. So we are going to check that to say that we are saving everything. It looks good. I would recommend that if you have some bad internet access, that if you are planning on adding a photo, I would probably fill out that entire form first before adding a photo. So I would fill out the form, save the site, and then I would edit it to add a photo. So to edit your site, basically, if you aren't clicked on it, you can click on your site, the info will come up, there will be a little pencil button down in the bottom, you can edit it, and then you could take a photo. So that way, so if you're in bad cell phone service, you at least save your entire form before adding a photo, which could, if the reception is bad, it could cancel your form, lose the data or something like that. So the photo is the least important part, so try that later. Okay, so yeah, I've clicked on my site. I can now see all of the information that I've entered, and now you will have the ability to add management records and monitoring records to your site. You can also, as I mentioned, edit that site. You can use this directions button to get directions to your site. You can favorite a site, you can delete your site. This is all the different stuff that you can do. This link button down in the up or the lower left corner shows you any linked management records or monitoring records. So that's just a shortcut to see those, but we don't have any yet. The three buttons down here, or the three dots in the lower right corner, have again more of those options that you would get if you had just scrolled down the form. So those are just shortcuts. All right. Okay, we want to make sure that our GPS accuracy is very high, and then we will enroll a new site, start streaming, and then we will walk around where we want our management zone to be. So you can see that as we walk, it is laying down points. You can then edit those points later if you would like, if they appear in a weird spot. And we just keep walking around until we get the boundary that we want. And then we press stop streaming. And there you have it. Before I go into the tutorial for submitting a monitoring report, here are a few tips for monitoring. So monitoring works the same way whether you are doing it pre or post treatment. Just some of the options that you're going to select in the app will change. When working in the app, you will need to submit a monitoring record before laying down points of where your quadrats will go. Otherwise, the quadrats will not have the data that they need since they pull that from that underlying layer or report that you've submitted. I'll show you how this works momentarily. Next, when monitoring, you will need to select areas to place quadrats for sampling. You will be placing a minimum of 4 quadrats in random locations per management zone. We suggest following the flowcharts in the SOP to do this, so please check those out before heading into the field. You will also need to think about how EFB is distributed across your management zone. Is it one large clump, like in this top image, or is it broken into smaller clumps, like on this image on the bottom? This will help you determine which flowchart to use in the SOP. If your EFB is clumped, try to distribute your monitoring quadrats across the clumps instead of concentrating them all in one spot, like in this bottom picture. So here is an example of those monitoring location flowcharts that I was talking about. These are found in the SOP, which is on the hub site. This is in Appendix D of the SOP. There are 3 different flowcharts that you can use depending on your situation. And this is just an example. This is establishing quadrat monitoring locations in a single patch or a single large area of EFB. So just to show you how this works, it's pretty simple. The first step is to find the cardinal direction of the longest axis through the patch that captures any density or environmental variance. So this could be moving from shallow water to deeper water, or from high EFB density to low EFB density. Anything that you think is going to be really representative of all of the different variants in your site. The second step is to estimate the length of the EFB patch, and then you will divide the estimated distance by the number of quadrats, which is usually 4. The app will tell you how many quadrats you need to get the distance between the quadrats. So then you flip a coin to choose whether to place the first quadrat at the edge in the edge of the patch or inside the patch. So you could say heads, you put the starting point on the edge of the patch. Tails, you put the starting point on the inside of the patch. Let's say we get tails. So then you would follow the flowchart this way, and you would take the number of steps corresponding with the determined distance and monitor there for quadrat number 1. So you just walk into your patch and then navigate to quadrat number 2 by walking the predetermined distance and then monitoring there. And then lastly, keep repeating that step number 5 for the rest of the quadrats. So try to make it fairly simple. As I mentioned, there's 2 other situations with different flowcharts. So you can follow these. You can also make up some random points, like in ArcGIS, before you go out in the field, not within the app, but basically trying to make it as random as possible and not just picking a site that you think, oh, this looks like it's got a lot of frog bit, I should monitor here. There are 4 rules when placing quadrats for monitoring. Quadrats must contain EFB unless there is none found, or if there is not enough EFB in your management zone to be contained within the required number of quadrats. Quadrats must not overlap one another. Quadrats should be placed randomly or as randomly as you can. The flowcharts in the SOP will help with this. In the Field Maps app, your quadrat points must be placed within the bounds of the management zone. They will then pull in the data from the latest monitoring report to function properly. If you place the points outside of the zone, it's not going to work correctly. We've talked about some do's and don'ts while monitoring. Let's actually submit a monitoring record. To do that, we will click on our management unit, and then we'll go to, you can either scroll down and go to monitoring records, or you can click on the little link and go to monitoring records that way. So we don't have any monitoring records yet. We will add one. And it will show you a link to the SOP if you need that. It will also show you the number of randomly located quadrats that you're going to need to collect. And this is based on the size of your management zone. So this is a fairly small one, and we'll be collecting the minimum 4 quadrats. So keep in mind this number that it generates when you are actually going to add your quadrats, because this is the number that we would like you to collect. So we'll put in the monitoring date. We'll say that's today. And it will ask you if this is pre or post-treatment monitoring. We have not treated this site yet, so we will call this pre-treatment monitoring. Put in my name. And then the next question is to estimate the percent cover of EFB across the management zone. And we can answer in these categories. So I will say that it is a monoculture, nearly 100% of the area. And then we'll ask you some questions about the frog bit. So are there flowers present? Are there fruits present? Are there turions present? And I will just make up some stuff here. Sure, let's just say they're all present. And now it says you can take photos. You can submit up to 3 photos. You can also record any notes. If you want to take a photo, I would save this form first and then edit it and then take a photo. Otherwise, if you're out in the field and you have bad reception, if it cancels your form for some reason, you won't lose your information. Or you can attach a photo using the attach button. But that's all we need for this part of the survey. Pretty simple, but we need to submit this first before we can put down any quadrats. So we'll click the checkbox up in the corner to submit this monitoring record. And now if we go to our linked monitoring records, you can see that it shows that we have one for this site, which is called test site for video, and the date and time at which that monitoring record occurred. So any of your monitoring records will be listed here. All right, the next step is, now that we've submitted our monitoring record, is to submit some quadrats. So say we have followed our protocol and we've determined where we're going to put our randomly positioned quadrats. Let's say we have navigated to our points and we want to lay one down right here. So we click that big blue plus sign in the bottom right corner, click on quadrats, and add a point. Again, you can take photos or attach photos here. You can look at the SOP, you can put in the monitoring date. And because we have submitted a monitoring form earlier, it will auto-generate the quadrat ID and the treatment status. So those fill in. You don't have to fill in anything there. We will measure the water depth. We'll just say that's 30 centimeters. And then we will lay down our quadrat, our 1 meter square quadrat, and estimate the percent coverage of EFB. I'll just say that in this example, 50% of my quadrat was covered in EFB. And now we have to think about its condition. Is it, are the majority of plants alive? Are they looking bad? Are they looking good? I will say that these are pretty healthy looking plants, so with leaves green and rigid. And you can also put in the percentage of senescent or wilting EFB rosettes. I'm going to put 0. Very happy plants in my example. All right, so now we're going to move on to the tiered monitoring for other types of plants. So tier 1 monitoring is where you will be putting in some very basic plant information, and this is required. So you have to determine within your 1 meter square quadrat the percentage of cover of these different types of plants. And then if you are really good at IDing plants, you could collect tier 2 data, which involves adding species level information. This is not required, but let's just go through tier 1 monitoring first. So let's say in my example, I have a bunch of Phragmites or common reed, and I just have frogbit. Those are my only plants that I've got in my quadrat. The first thing I would probably do is you'll see this note that pops up here down at the bottom that says free floating plant coverage should include EFB cover. And since we said that we had 50% EFB cover, then we have to put at least 50%. And since I said that EFB is the only other plant other than Phragmites here, we'll put 50%. If we had some other free-floating plants, we would increase this to include both EFB and any other species of free-floating plants. Since I said we had Phragmites, I will put in the percent cover of emergent plant cover. Let's just say that was, 20%. We have no other species, so no floating leaf plants and no submergent plants or plants under the water. So that is looking good. If we wanted to collect tier 2 data, we would change this to yes. And then this could take a second to load depending on how your cell phone coverage is out in the field, because this has a big species list that needs to populate here. So don't worry if it takes a second for this to appear. So it also has a little note that EFB cover does not need to be reported again here. So all that we would have to put in this example is Phragmites. So let's go to the menu here. We'll filter by species. You can actually type in Phragmites, and hey, we're going to say that this is the subspecies australis, the invasive common reed. And I had said that there was 20% cover of that. And since we don't need to report EFB, we're all good. You could also do something where if you were submitting a partial species list, you could toggle this to yes. So say you only knew how to identify like one species that you saw in your tier 2 monitoring list. You could just report that single species, and maybe because it's something that you want to keep track of, like another invasive plant, like Phragmites, for example, you could just submit this as a partial species list, and we would know, this is not every species that you saw in the quadrat, but it is one that, you were just interested in taking a note of. We still have your tier 1 data, so that is good. And you can put in any additional notes about what you saw in your quadrat. You can submit up to 3 photos again. And that is it. You click on check up at the top. And we have our quadrat. So we would repeat this process 3 more times for a total of 4 quadrats across our management zone. That's it for monitoring. To add a management report, we do the same as we did for the monitoring, where we click on our unit and then go to the linked records. We will select management records. We don't have any yet, so we will add one. You can add a photo if you want. It'll show you the site ID, and then we will put in the date that we managed our site. Let's just say it's today. If you managed multiple times using the same technique, there will be a spot where you can add in a start date and an end date further down in the form. But for now, we will just assume that we are doing one management action. my name. Now we can select whether we are using the Missing Treatment Tracker or not. So the Missing Treatment Tracker is the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network Treatment Tracker. If you are part of a SISMA or some other organization that uses this to track your herbicide or other management actions, then you can select this and you can put in your treatment tracker ID, the exact site name as it appears in the treatment tracker, and we will get your management data, and you don't need to fill out the rest of the form other than the required items below. But this is so that those folks who use this don't have to enter this information all over again. But many people will not be using the treatment tracker, so we'll unselect that and we will put in our information manually. So we can put in the control method that we are using at our site. Let's say that we are hand pulling frogbit at this site. So this is a manual control method. And there are some optional questions. So for instance, the total person hours, I will say, 20 hours, sure. So the options that will appear below will vary depending on which control method you choose. So for example, if we choose chemical, we're going to have a lot more information to fill out. And then that information will appear below. So say we are using herbicide, you would put in whether, if you're broadcasting, foliar spray, or if you're hand swiping, if you're using some other application method, you can put that in the notes. But you could put in the chemical used. Say I'm going to use, glyphosate, whatever. And then you put in the concentration, the total active ingredient used in ounces, the mix rate. There's a lot of required fields for herbicide, so make sure that you know all of this information or can convert it to the correct units. If you've used a second chemical, it will ask you that information here. Any kind of surfactant used or dilutant, the amount of mixture used, anything that has an asterisk is going to be required. So maybe take a look at this before you go out in the field. And then, let's look at another example. If we checked mechanical as our control method, it would ask you for the type of equipment used. If you used biocontrol, no additional questions. But let's stick with our original option of manual removal by hand. That's the simplest for this example. The next question is, what percentage of the live EFB in the management zone was treated/removed? I'm going to say 100%, because we were really efficient. And so, this, as I mentioned before, for this example, we'll just say that the site was managed once. But if you did manage it like 3 times, say you went out 3 different days to hand pull all of that EFB, you can put in the start date and the end date to encompass all of those 3 times. But we're just going to go with 1. And then you can submit any notes. And then you'll go back and we'll submit the form by clicking the check mark up at the top. And that's it for submitting a form. If you want to look back at that form or edit it, you can go to the linked forms, go to management records. You will see now that there is a record here. Click on that, and then you can edit it if you would like. And that's all for submitting monitoring forms. It's pretty simple. Before we finish up, here are some tips for data management in FrogBATT. Using the app is not the only way to manage your data. You can also edit any data you'd like via your desktop computer using ArcGIS Online. As I mentioned before, consider who is going to manage your management zone. That should be the person who creates it. Lastly, all FrogBATT data must be finalized by December 1st of each year. At this point, EFB collaborative staff will analyze your data. All right, that's almost it for the FrogBATT tutorial. At the end here, we just want to remind you to clean your equipment after going out in the field, and that's to prevent the spread of European frogbit and any other invasive species you might have picked up along the way. You'll also want to make sure that all of your data is complete, so you might want to double check your data upon returning from the field. And don't forget to read the SOP for all the fine details of how to work with FrogBATT, and make sure to email us with any questions you have at efb@glc.org. Thank you for watching and happy data collecting!